concerns. All right, let's continue with my game take. What I liked, that list was essentially the defensive plays made in the game, and there were about 7 of them that really were impactful. The red zone defense, really good yesterday, 1 for 5. Miami helped out here and there. I thought overall the game plan offensively pretty solid, great balance. They ran the football. Debo stood out. Rodriguez stood out. Their third down conversions, 6 for 13 in the game, allowed them to win time of possession, run 10 more offensive plays than Miami did. And their, punt coverage and kickoff coverage is outstanding. All right, what I did not like, you start with the turnovers, the 2 of them. They just can't, even against a team that isn't good, the first team they haven't played in a while that isn't good, you can't lose the turnover battle. They potentially could have lost the turnover battle -1 and won the game, but -2, forget about it. And the last one in overtime was pretty much ball game. It didn't have to be so easy for it to be ball game. The defense could have kept Devon Achane from rumbling 22 yards on 3 plays to set up chip shot field goal range, but that hasn't happened a lot this year, so shouldn't have expected it there. And again, the Sanderstill muffed punt, look, they put him in there as the backup punt returner, so they must have thought he could do it. It was the first ever punt return attempt for him in the NFL, and he botched it badly, and it was really hurtful. Miami was able to, drive the ball down the field. The 4th down decision by McDaniel, I thought was a bad one. Get to that, coming up. They missed out on taking over in great field position, their own 44-yard line with 4 minutes to go in a tie game. Number 2 on the list after the 2 turnovers, the -2 in the turnover margin category, Matt Gay, the kicker. 2 missed kicks, 51 yards out and then 56 yards out. The 51-yarder was just barely wide right. And the sack that preceded it, we'll get to that when we talk about Mariota and his game, was hurtful to that opportunity for 3. Look, this league in 2025, a 51-yarder is 2015's 41-yarder. A 56-yarder is 2015's 46-yarder. The league is making these kicks on the regular, and our guy can't kick it, from 50 and out. I mean, he's made a couple here and there, but that was his weakness coming in. Kicker's really been an issue for this team. They have not figured that one out for sure. Matt Gay on the list of bad. Red zone offense on the list of bad. 0 for 3. On the opening drive, there was the false start on the 4th and 2 that they were going for on Rodriguez in the backfield. They had to kick a field goal on that one. The second miss was before the field goal that made it 6-6 late in the first half. There was an interesting decision made by Mike McDaniel on that drive. Instead of taking a 4th and 5, they had 2 penalties on one play. I think it was an illegal shift and also an offensive pass interference. Instead of a 4th and 5, he decided to give him another shot on 3rd and 18. They got much of that penalty yardage back before a field goal that tied it at 6. But the penalties and that opportunity to get a touchdown. Look, I think they would have kicked the field goal on 4th and 5 anyway. Who knows? And then the last one was the incompletion to Ertz. I mean, how many times have we seen in the low red zone that almost same exact route that Ertz has run very well, and he stumbles coming out of it, and instead of a touchdown, it's an incompletion and a turnover on downs. So 0 for 3 in the red zone is on my list of things that were not good from the game. So we talked about the positives with the defense, and there were 7 impactful plays made in the game defensively. And that's a big change from where we've been over the last month and a half to 2 months. But the defense also was a lot of what it's been, giving up chunk plays, giving up lots of yards on the ground, people wide the blank open a lot. I thought that it was a mismatch. The first 3 plays of the game, right? 11-yard run by Achane, a 14-yard pass to Waddle. I mean, both just so easy. And then Achane, a 23-yard run. We were talking about on Friday, outside zone against the edge setters. Preston Smith, news break, he's not an edge setter. at this point in his career. I mean, they gained 48 yards as easily as Detroit gained all of theirs last week in 3 plays. Achane had 50 yards at the end of the first quarter on 5 carries. He was averaging 10 yards a carry. And then, inexplicably, now part of it was that this was a very low possession game. I think ultimately Detroit had 9 with the 1 in overtime. Washington had 8. Both teams only had 3 in the first half of the game. So that, limits the number of plays that Miami had. So, but Achane went basically the second and third without getting opportunities, and then got a bunch of them in the fourth and in overtime. The Dolphins, it's not like they rolled up the 500, plus yards, 546 that Detroit had. It was just 311, but it was just on 54 plays. The offense, again, 1 time of possession. They averaged nearly 6 yards per play, not the 8 Detroit did last week, but still too many. They had 169 yards rushing, 5.5 yards per carry. Achane himself, 5.7 yards per carry, 21 for $120. I said on Friday, one of the keys to the game is just hold them under 5 yards per carry, because Gibbs was at 9.5 last week, and they couldn't do that. That was too big of an ask. The Dolphins hurt themselves. The defense potentially, got away with other big chunk plays. Waddle had 2 flat-out drops on wide open throws. He still averaged 17.3 yards per reception on 3 catches. They had a penalty on their opening drive, delay a game. That resulted in a field goal. He missed the wide open tight end on another one. That drive ended in a field goal. But, credit Washington's defense on a lot of these stops. It just didn't. If you're watching the game, it doesn't look like a good defense. It's not like I came out of that thinking, wow, Quinn, what a difference he made. They were still giving up the gashing runs and the chunk, throws and the easy pitch and catch throws. But they did make plays against a much lesser team than Detroit, a much lesser team than Seattle, a much lesser team than Kansas City, a much lesser team than Dallas offensively. If you go back to their last 4 games, right? Is that their last 4 games, or did I miss a game in there? I forget at this point. But anyway, I mean, I have to say, I don't care what analytics say about Mike McDaniel's decision with 1:44 to go on 4th and goal from the 1. The context there said kick, kick, kick. They had been stuffed on 3 straight plays. They were lucky on 2nd down they didn't turn it over. They went back to a play in which, after getting stuffed 3 plays in a row, that's context, people. All right. They went back to, you can say good decision, bad play call, but they were, they had already been stopped on another 4th and goal. They had been stuffed on 3 straight plays. In that moment, it seemed like Washington had a decent chance to get the stop. And the field goal would have given them a lead. Washington had no timeouts left and had only scored 1 touchdown on the day. Was he really that afraid he was going to lose on a walk-off touchdown? You miss and you leave them with, terrible field position, and maybe you're thinking it's overtime, but Washington got down there. I thought that he should kick the field goal. Next up on the list of things that I didn't like in the game. This kind of all comes together in one big bucket, if you will. Penalties, late substitutions that led to unnecessary timeouts. All of that was a problem. Opening drive, there's a late substitution that forces a timeout on a 1st and 10. Later in that drive, false start on Rodriguez. So instead of going for a 4th and 2, maybe they don't get it, but they don't have a chance to even try, and they kick a field goal. Kinlaw had an offsides in the 3rd quarter on a 2nd and 10 that turned it into a 2nd and 5. And then at the end of the 3rd quarter, Kinlaw jumped offsides again. But fortunately, the 3rd quarter clock had expired. They had 2 penalties on 1 play. They had 2 false starts on 1 drive deep in their own territory. The 4th and goal at the 2 before the Ertz stumble and incompletion, they had to call timeout for a late substitution. You just can't waste timeouts like that. You can't have, pre-snap penalties like they've had. They just don't have that margin for error. Some of it, of course, you could attribute to the personnel that's out there. There's no doubt that they would tell you, look, dude, we got guys out there that, we haven't spent a lot of time with, and there's a lot of formation stuff, and we're not, yeah. But you know what? The late substitution thing is a problem that goes back to last year. They had that.